Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our What's Up Wednesday webinar powered by Sunshine, How Solar Projects Benefit Libraries and Their Communities. My name is Courtney Brown, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be your host and question moderator today. Our presenters this morning are Stori Snyder, Director at the Brown County Public Library, and Lynn Hobbs, Director at the Pendleton Community Public Library. Just a couple of announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training venue, please see our continuing education website. This session is about an hour, so you'll receive one LEU for this presentation. If you're watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube, or you can also find those instructions on the ISL's continuing education site under LEU policies. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our presenters and have Stori start us off.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, my name is Stori Snyder, and I am the director at the Brown County Public Library. And our solar project was completed in 2022, so it's still quite new. This is the logo we created for our informational and fundraising materials, this Solar by 2022 logo here. And I'll explain a little later why we included the year in our logo. The Energized Day refers to a party that we had the day we flipped the switch and turned the inverter so that we were online. We had a big event where we invited the community. We had legislators attend. We had a band. We had cake. We passed out solar lanterns. It was a good time. Next slide, please. So our library building was constructed and built in 2000 and opened the doors in January of 2001. So we were 22 years old. We have 2 floors and are 18,000 square feet. And the building was built with a bond that we rolled off of in 2019. And if any of you have rolled off a bond recently, then you might have seen a reduction in your operating revenue. We knew that that was going to happen, so we were looking for some ways to help stretch our dollars into the future. So we actually visited this idea in 2019, and then the pandemic came along and we put it on the shelf and then pulled it back down in 2021 to revisit again. So the carport structure was completed in 2022, and we also had our lighting switched to LED light bulbs in the winter of 2021 and spring of 2022. And we have an EV charger, which has there's one charger with 2 leads out there, so 2 cars can charge at the same time. This project was funded using LERF money. Our friends of the library had a very successful fundraising campaign. I neglected to include that we also used some endowment funds for this project, and we also received an Office of Energy Development grant for $50,000 for a total project of total price of $841,921. The artist's rendering that you see in this picture here was really great to allow us to have our community members rally around the scope and scale of this project. So we used this image in our informational materials and our fundraising materials, and then also had this on a poster, a foam board poster inside the library so that people could see just how large this project was going to be. Next slide, please. So how we did it? Well, we asked a lot of questions, lots and lots of questions, and we decided for us, we wanted to have to put out an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. And that was new to me. I had experience with an RFP before a request for proposal when we knew exactly what we wanted, but the RFQ allowed us to ask for vendors to, and multiple presentations. Actually, it was really interesting. We had lots of questions, of course, and then we would receive answers, which then only prompted a new round of questions. So we had each group come out multiple times to give presentations to the board to continue to answer those questions until we felt like we were at a point where we could make a selection. And we chose to go with PSG Energy Group, which
Stori,
was a fantastic, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going to hop in real quick. You cut out when you were talking about the RFQ process. Would you mind going over that again?
Sure, yes. Okay. We chose to go with an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, which is different than a request for proposal, an RFP. RFQ allowed us to be a little more vague in what we wanted because we weren't exactly sure. We didn't have specs, we didn't have a design yet. We just needed to have a qualified vendor that was able to complete a solar project, respond to our request, and then we would move to a design phase afterwards. So that the RFQ is the route we went. We did have vendors respond to the RFQ, and they came out to our library and gave presentations to us. And we asked lots of questions and asked them to come back out a second time to give more presentations and answer more questions. And then we were at a point where we felt like we could really select a trusted partner to move forward with this project. We chose PSG Energy Group, which was fantastic. Jennifer Merslack is the president, and our project manager, Michaela Bell, they were amazing, wonderful people, and felt so lucky that we had such a great experience with them. So the first, or maybe the next phase, or the first of the final phases, is this due diligence or feasibility section of the project for us. So we decided on somebody to help us work through this, that we still weren't sure. Do we have the ability to really hammer through 10 feet of Brown County stone? Can we get the permits that we need for this project? Can we secure the financing that we need for this project? So this next phase, this kind of due diligence to make sure that the project can be successful, was very helpful for us. At this point, we had not committed to the project overall. We were committing to finding out if it was going to even work. And I think that this notice to proceed section, I don't know if that's something that's maybe kind of unique to what PSG was offering. I know some other vendors, it didn't seem like that was part of the process for them. So just as you're writing down your questions and you're asking vendors and you're discussing options with them, that might be something that you want to just have an awareness of. So we found out, yes, we are going to be able to move forward, and that then went into the construction, the first of the construction part of the project. So the drilling, the underground work, all the big trucks, all the noisy machines, closing the parking lot. When there was a lull in construction, we could open the parking lot back up again, but when the construction ramped up again, then we closed the parking lot. It was very interesting to see the drilling down, these big giant hammers drilling down, and then this machine that ran underneath the parking lot. I ran pipes underneath the parking lot, towards the building, around the building, up the back hill, and up to our transformer. It was all very cool. We actually have made a video of this. It's in the resources on the last page of the PowerPoint, which is a little 6-minute video of our timeline for this, which is full of pictures if you want to see that. We did the LED, we swapped out the light bulbs I mentioned, and then the racking and the panels and the wiring showed up, and that was really cool how fast that whole section of the project really went. And then we had our Energize Day. I will say just one thing, that PSG was able to procure all of our materials without delay at a time when many materials were becoming unavailable. So they had a very strong supply chain connection, which was very important for us at the time. And I'll talk about that more in a minute too. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a little bit about the project overall. The solar structure is the lower picture here, if you're looking at the upstairs, out the upstairs window of our library, that's what it looks like in our parking lot. We have 368 modules there, and we're producing over 150,000 kilowatts of energy each year, which lets us have a carbon offset of about, it's equivalent to removing about 25 cars off the road each year, which is pretty cool. Again, the LEDs and the EV charger, and we also upgraded our building management system. We had a building management system, but this upgrade allowed us to be more efficient in how we manage the heating and the cooling of the facility. So one thing, and I think Lynn will probably talk about this also, and if you mind too, that the most you can reduce your consumption in the beginning, the better. So being able to swap out our light bulbs that allowed us to design the array to meet the needs that we had after the reduction of the consumption of energy that we currently have. So as much as you can do that ahead of time, the more effective your project will be. And I'll just, the Energy Technology Innovation Grant that's listed here, I had mentioned that on one of the first slides. Michaela, our project manager, actually wrote that grant for us, and it's a state grant, and it was very strenuous. It was a lot. It was a big grant, but she did that on our behalf, and she was awarded that grant for us, which was amazing. And that's one of the things that Jennifer, when we had talked about the financial part of it and that due diligence phase, she brought in a financial advisor to talk to us, and also had mentioned that there are grants out there that they would help to try to secure those for us. We also applied for an EBSCO grant, which is available right now, I know, and I can send that in a chat after I'm done, a link to that. That's a global grant, which is much more competitive to get. So this structure allows us to be 100 supported by we are 100 supported by our solar structure. So our entire library is using the sun to run it. So, okay, next slide, please. We are grid tied, which means our energy provider, which is Duke Energy, is we still have their transformer. We have our transformer and we have their transformer. And any time that we overproduce, our energy goes into the grid. So it goes back to the grid. And then when we underproduce, if we have cloudy days, then the energy then comes back to us. This is this net metering benefit has expired in the state of Indiana, but this was the reason why we needed to have so the net metering benefit expired on June 30th, 2022, which that logo that I showed you in the very first slide said solar by 2022. And that was the reason why we included that in our logo, because it was of the utmost importance that we had this project online before that expired. And the fact that PSG could procure all of our materials and their supply chain was so strong, we were able to meet that deadline. We had about 4 weeks before the deadline ended. So it was very important for us to be able to take advantage of this net metering benefit before it did expire. So the whole idea is that we overproduce, we send it to Duke, and then when we underproduce, they send it back to us. Next slide, please. This is a Duke Energy bill right after we energized. So our party was on May 27th in 2022, but the system was operational and the sun was shining. So we went ahead and flipped the switch on this thing in early May. And then for our party, we turned it off and then turned the inverters back on. But you can see here, there's a dramatic decline in our electric usage in May. And my current bills right now, each month are about $30. That line is flat now. Every month, the line is pretty much flat. And the $30, it's service fees and connection fees. Next slide, please. Okay, guaranteed energy savings contract. So there's a lot to unpack on this slide. First of all, and what it is an agreement that allows your library to go into, to have a contract with a qualified provider, and that's important here, qualified provider. So it allows your library to enter a contract with a qualified provider that the provider will guarantee that the energy and operating cost will be reduced by a specific amount. And if that specific amount is not achieved, then that provider will reimburse you the difference between what they guaranteed you it would be reduced by and what it actually was reduced by. So this level of accountability was really of interest to my library board. They really liked this extra layer of, okay, they're going to design this structure and make sure that it works properly, or else they're going to be paying for it. And that was of interest to us. So we decided to go into a guaranteed energy savings contract with our provider, with PSG. And the second part of the GESC that's really interesting that we explored at the beginning during that feasibility part when Jennifer was talking with us about financial options is that the building, that your library, you don't have to have all the money up front to pay for your project. You can take out a loan, a specific GESC loan. And what that will do is that allows you to pay on the loan with the amount of money that you have saved from the project. So that, I can't speak into much detail about that because we opted to fund our project with other sources and not take out that loan. However, when we did meet with the financial advisor in the beginning, we were told that for that to be optimized, the loans usually are around $1 million, and ours was going to be a little bit underneath that. But it's an option that's available to you, and it's something worth exploring if this is of interest to you. There's a link at the bottom of this slide and also on the resources slide that takes you to a page to learn more about GESCs. And then the second link from the bottom, the provider list, this is important because only the people who are on the Indiana State provider list can enter into a GESC with you. And I looked at this list a couple of days ago, and there are maybe 19 providers on the list right now. It's a very strenuous process to become a qualified provider on this list, so that the folks there definitely know what they're doing. Now, I will say that this list of providers, not everyone on the list will do solar for you. So there are other energy saving services that companies provide that are not solar. So if you go to that list and you just start calling each vendor on there and ask if they provide solar, then you can quickly narrow it down to the ones that are on the list and start to ask them questions. Even if you don't want to do a guaranteed energy savings contract, you know that these people are qualified to do such projects. So it's a good place to start with gathering information and asking questions. Okay, next slide, please. This just highlights where our funding resources came from. And I will say our Friends of the Library fundraising initiative was live in a very heavily forested county, so they were unable to have solar on their homes, and they felt like this was a really great way for them to be able to support this initiative by providing money to have the library have solar panels on our building. So it was very successful. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are slides that I can't speak in great detail on, but I wanted to include them. I was at the ILF conference in November, and I had Jennifer and Michaela with me. And Jennifer is the one who, these were her slides that she was talking about. And she is she's a really great resource. I actually included her email address on that resource slide too. She's on the board of Solar Energy Industries Association, and she's on top of her game when it comes to this. But this is something that was not available to us when we did our project. So our net metering benefit was what we took advantage of. And this actually is probably better. So what this is, the Inflation Reduction Act Direct Pay. What this is, that it allows renewable energy, so solar would count, to be eligible for this federal direct pay thing. And this direct pay thing is that you get 30%, that 30% of your project costs will be covered. And libraries are eligible for this, which is also what's fantastic about it. Next slide, please. So there's been $369 billion set aside to fund these energy and climate projects. And this 30% off of your project, your qualifying project for libraries is great. But then there's also these things called adders or bonus credits, which allow you to stack that percentage. Next slide, please. So you can add another 10% if you're using domestic content. You can add another 10% if your project's in a low income community. And so you can see, so your 30 might go to 40, it might go to 50. This is all changing on the daily, and so the law is in place and it is there, but all the people who are implementing these types of services are trying to figure out the fine details of all of this. So this is something that if you're interested in this, I would really encourage you to ask questions about it, because it's evolving very quickly. And there's benefits to this if you employ it sooner rather than later. So again, I'm sorry, I can't talk in much detail about this. I just wanted you to hear these words, and I wanted you to be familiar with this enough to be able to ask the questions about it and to just be aware of these opportunities that could be available to you. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my last slide. And again, this was one of Jennifer's slides, so she could talk all about this, but just so you also have heard these words and are slightly familiar with this and can ask questions about it, the SRECs, the Solar Renewable Energy Certificates. And Lynn, I'm not sure if you guys do this or not at your library, but we did not sell our SRECs. You can sell them 1 year and not the next, and then you can and then not the next, is my understanding. But what the SRECs are is that it allows, and whoever owns the SRECs, it allows you to have exclusive rights to make claims about using or being powered with renewable energy. So it could be a revenue stream for you if you want to sell these SRECs. It's a commodity. There's actually not a market for this in Indiana, but you can sell them to other states. But this allows, so if a company buys them, so if Starbucks, for example, buys these SRECs from you, then they can say, we're being powered with renewable energy, but then you no longer can. So you're selling the right to use the words or make the claim. And I have a few links that I will toss in the chat that explain a little bit more about the SRECs and the Inflatable Reduction Act, and just to give you a jumping off point to learn more about those. But that's the last that I have. So I will just remind you that that very last page in the PowerPoint has a resources page where you can find out more about the Guaranteed Energy Savings Contract, the provider list, the Office of Energy Development grant, our little solar timelines on there, that little video. I also put a link in there to our Friends of the Library fundraising campaign and Jennifer's email address. So with that, then I'll pass it over to you, Lynn.
All right, thanks, Stori. It's a ton of good information there. I'm really glad that you covered a lot of that funding stuff. If any of you know me out there, you know I like to talk funding and money, but I was so appreciative that Stori covered it for us today, because there's lots of complicated ways to look at the different ways you can fund these awesome projects. So, all right, I want to talk about our solar project at the Pendleton Community Public Library, and I'm going to talk kind of about just the overall picture that we have at the library for our energy efficiency. And you'll see there on the screen outside image of the library. You'll see it's very long. It is 28,050 square feet. It is all on one floor. So it's a pretty long walk from one end to the other. That also afforded us a lot of roof space for us to put some solar panels. And then we do have some carports behind the building there, and you'll see some images of those a little bit later. So our building was constructed in 1991. It was remodeled in 2005 and then again in 2020. And in 2005, we doubled the size of the facility and we added geothermal heating and cooling. And I was brand new at the time. I was not actually involved in the planning of this project. I came on right when we were opening the bids for the construction for the general contractor, but we were very much dedicated in having geothermal heating and cooling in this new building, to the point that we were putting so much money towards that we were shaving other things off of the project, which was not a good idea, unfortunately, because the geothermal heating and cooling did not function for us as smoothly as we would have liked it to, because where we shaved some money off of the project was in revamping our existing HVAC environment. So we were kind of existing on very old, outdated boilers and VAV boxes. And then we had this snazzy new geothermal on the other half of the building, and they just didn't play nicely. I want to just touch upon geothermal just a little bit about what it is. I know we're talking about solar here today, but if you're looking at just overall energy projects, geothermal might be something for you to consider as well. Essentially, what geothermal does is it pulls air in from deep in the earth rather than from just out in, outside your facility. So you obviously want to bring fresh air into your facility when you heat and cool, so you're not just circulating the same stale old air. And you probably have your temperature set point somewhere around 68 to 72. So when you're bringing in, 98-degree air on a very hot day or 10-degree air on a very cold day, it takes a lot of energy to bring that air to your 68 to 72-degree set point. With geothermal, you're basically pulling that air out of deep into the earth, sort of like a cave temperature where it's going to be in the mid 50s. And then you're looking at using less energy to bring the temperature from that mid 50 to your set point, again, around the 68 to 72 range. So ideally, that's what geothermal was supposed to do for us. Again, it didn't work as well as we would have liked it. It cooled the entire building and only heated half of it. It's better now in that we've done some additional work that I'll talk about here in just a minute, but I would advise you looking at the entire library environment as far as your heating and cooling, your lighting, your energy efficiency overall. It doesn't make sense to throw $1 million at a solar project and then have an HVAC system that's super outdated and not energy efficient, or have windows that are leaking like a sieve. So if you can afford to really look at the entire facility and the energy efficiency of the facility, that's the way to go, rather than just focusing on, the cool project of solar or geothermal, and unfortunately not looking at the bigger picture. So geothermal heating and cooling is just heating and cooling for us. So then, of course, we looked at LED lighting. We went ahead and replaced all of the lighting, parking lot lights, inside, outside. At that time, our local utility, and we have a local municipal utility here, it's Pendleton Utilities, it's not Duke Energy or any of the big guys. They looked at our billing because it went down, and they were like, oh, you know what? We've got the Pendleton Library on the wrong rate. They're supposed to be on this other rate. And so when they made that adjustment, it completely negated our LED lighting project. So we just could not seem to get ahead of our electric bills. And in the meantime, they're just going up and up and up and up. So we started looking at solar panels, and we'll look at those, of course, here in just a minute. I did also want to mention that generator docking station that's listed. We've got all kinds of stuff going on here. We had a tornado in Pendleton on Memorial Day of 2019 and lost a lot of trees, a lot of properties, and we were without power for days. And it was unfortunate that the library could not serve as any kind of an emergency shelter or anything during that time, even just for people to cool off and power their phones, because we were also without power. So when we did our project in 2020, we decided that we would put a docking station on the facility, and we would rent a generator from another state over, get that here in our parking lot, plug and play, turn it on, and it powers the entire building. So we opted for that instead of installing a permanent generator. But you can tell my board is very focused on energy efficiency and having lots of different prongs to the approach of how we can power this building. So next slide, please. Okay, so here is just a quick graphic of our huge, ginormous electric bills. So our facility, like I said, is 28,000 square feet. We don't have anything like out of the ordinary going on, I don't think. I mean, we're not running fans overnight or anything. You know, we've got everything on occupancy schedules, but I mean, in 2019, our bills were nearing the $70,000 range, and they just kept going up and up and up and up. And part of it was the rate was going up. And again, it's a local utility, so we don't have any wiggle room at all. The other part of it where these riders are going up, you know, your service fees and your convenience charges and all these things that they just kind of slap on your bills, and you don't even really know what the benefit is for them, but you got to pay them. So we just kept seeing our bills go up. And we thought we've got to do something to offset this. And so that's when we started looking at a solar project. Next slide, please. Actually, I'm sorry. Can you go back one? I'm sorry, Courtney. I did want to point out here, just real quick. So 2019 was obviously the peak of what we were paying. In 2020, we had COVID. So we were closed during a portion of 2020. That's why the number goes down there. In 2021, we did the remediation of an envelope test that I'm going to talk about. And then 2020 is the first year that we started using solar, but we actually didn't turn our roof panels on until the springtime, and we didn't turn the carport panels on until the fall. So we have not even operated in a full year with the whole array. I do have a report for the savings to date as of the 6th of March. And since our project started, we've saved $21,669. And our kilowatt hours is 225,717. So I'm definitely pleased with those numbers. Okay, Courtney, thank you. Okay, so here's just kind of another shot of the building. I love that picture. It's taken from a drone and it's so clear and I just love it. You'll see the carports there in the back. So I want to talk about this envelope test. And as I was saying, it's a really good idea if you can to just look at the entire energy environment of your facility and make sure that everything's just kind of shorn up as well as you can. An envelope test is something we had performed by a different contractor. It's also called a blower test, if you've ever heard of that. They will seal your building and pressurize it. And then they use infrared light and theatrical fog machines to find leaks, essentially. So we have huge windows, like walls of windows. And what they would do is they seal the building, they pressurize it, and then they would stand outside with these smoke machines near our windows. And because the building was pressurized, it was attempting to pull that air in. And within minutes, areas of the library would be full of smoke. And the guys were outside doing this. It's just the smoke is coming inside because my windows are leaky. So smoke can get in, obviously cool and hot air can get in. So we realized some things that we needed to do to really get the building operating as smoothly as possible. It wasn't expensive stuff. A lot of it was, again, just caulking windows. There were some things that were up in our decking, which is the area sort of up above your ceiling grid and the roof, where there were just open areas. Cool air was coming in, literally blowing around up above our ceiling lines. So we were just getting some things sealed up there. We also did a complete HVAC overhaul with our most recent building project, and that just turned everything, what we should have done way back in 2005, getting rid of everything that was still pneumatic to make sure it was digital, that it was playing with the other system. All of these VAV boxes and whatever that were old and outdated. I don't know what VAV boxes are, but I know that I had like 25 of them and they all had to be replaced. And it took us like 15 years to be able to get through all of them to get them replaced. Not really, but again, just go all the way in if you can, if you've got the money and you've got the time and the resources just to go all the way in. So then we started looking at designing the actual solar array, and the array is, you know, where you're placing the panels, how much of an offset you think you're going to get. And this is where I want to talk about working with your board, because I think obviously your boards have concerns about solar projects and they may be reluctant. I know that I have colleagues out there who have met with vendors and they've presented to their boards on several occasions, but the board is just not willing to kind of take the plunge and move forward with the project. So I want to talk a little bit about what the concerns might be that your board has and how you can work towards getting these projects approved. So one of the first things your board might be thinking of is the public perception of this project, and particularly as it relates to the aesthetics of it. A lot of us, because we're the public library, we have beautiful buildings that are in the town square. They may be in the historical town square. They may be historical buildings themselves. They're often very visible, for accessibility, and also because they're the crown jewels of our communities, right? So I can see why there may be concern if you're going to put solar panels on a building that's going to change the feel and the appearance of a town square, an historic town square, and what the aesthetics look like. So they're legitimate concerns, and solar panels don't come in a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different designs. I mean, pretty much what you see is what you get. So if they don't like the looks of it aesthetically, there's not really a lot you can do with it. Now, you can place them in ways that they're kind of hidden if you have flat roofs versus where they're more visible. Like in my facility, they're pretty visible. I will say in my facility, not a lot of people notice them on the roof, which is weird because they're really visible when you approach the building. I guess they're just not looking up. They're looking more, at the doorway and the rest of the property. I like the way they look, to be honest. When they first put them on, I thought those look really cool. My board likes them, and I have never had a single person, not a single one in our community, come to me and say they think they're ugly. Why did you do that? If anything, the response has been very, very positive from the community, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too.
I just want to hop in real quick. I'm
Sure.
sorry, we have a question.
Okay.
When discussing this as a possible project, our staff has concerns about snow removal with the panels in the parking lot. Was that a problem at all this winter, or did snow stay on the panels and not fall on the parking lot?
So that's a really good question. My board was afraid that snow was going to slide off of the panels, or big chunks of ice just off of the panels and then land on people. Which is a legitimate, question. It's a good question. I didn't notice anything different from snow melting off of the panels than I did off of the regular roof. And our panels had a little bit of a lip on them. So it's not like something would just totally slide off. It kind of stopped just like you would have on a regular guttering on a roof line. So I did not notice anything different with that this year. But it was a concern of the board. Stori, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
We did not add snow guards to our panels. We had thought about it too. We wanted to get through one winter and see what it was like. And I actually was walking out to the parking lot one day, and I happened to be out there at the perfect time when snow was melting and just sliding right off these. I took video of you can just hold the phone in one spot and you would catch snow falling off within 30 seconds. It was a perfectly temperature for everything to melt. And I've taken that to the board, and it's an aftermarket add-on. So it was nothing that we needed to do at the time. We will be considering adding that, but you don't have to have it to start. And even if you don't have it, it's up to your comfortability level of your board, I suppose.
Yeah, and you'll see on the final slide that I have on my presentation, our carports are guttered. They actually have a guttering system on them. But for the roof, they have a little bit of a lip. The roof was more of a concern of them the snow sliding off. But yeah, that was a concern of my board. Your board is concerned about the ongoing costs and the maintenance, and they should be, and you should be too. Those are the questions that you want to ask, and you want to get answers that make you comfortable, and the answers that don't just sound like a sales pitch, so your vendor can, get the job and design your solar array. So make sure that you're asking those questions and that you're getting answers that you think are satisfactory. I'm happy to talk with board members about the success of our project. I'm sure Stori is too. Once you take something like this on, I think you really become an advocate for it. So if you want to go outside of a vendor that you might be working with to try to get an unbiased opinion of what this project kind of looks like or what they could look like, feel free to send them my way. But your board's going to be concerned about ongoing costs like maintenance. What are you looking at for an annual maintenance? For us, we're looking at $2,600 in the first year, and then that can increase 2.5% after that. Your board might ask about cleaning the panels. Your board might wonder what happens when we need to get the roof replaced and the panels are still up there. I mean, the panels have a 25-year warranty on them. If I need a new roof in 10 years, then what? I'm gonna have to take all these panels off, get a new roof, and then put them back on. How much is that gonna cost? They're gonna be concerned about the warranties themselves, what they cover. They're gonna be concerned about if it's going to affect the roof itself. Is it going to make the roof vulnerable, put holes in the roof? I will say we did have a couple areas with roof damage from getting the panels placed on the roof that they had to go back and repair. That's bound to happen. I mean, they're schlepping all these panels all over the place, and you've got a bunch of guys up there and they're bolting these things into the roof. So that's bound to happen. So they're going to have all of these concerns, and I think they're legitimate concerns. And again, talk with your vendor or other colleagues and get answers, because that's the best way to make a decision, right? Is to get all the information so you're comfortable moving forward. So we did this thing called a helioscope to design the solar array, and the helioscope's really cool. It's this super sophisticated software. I wouldn't know the first thing about how it actually works, but I know what it looked like when we were using it. I think probably it plugs in your coordinates for longitude, latitude, and it can take into account how high the sun's going to be and how high the trees are around you and everything, so that you can in real time put a solar panel over here and see how much that's going to add to your project. Or let's plop a carport here and see what that does to our project. Let's cut this tree down so that we don't have as much shade on this panel and see what that does. And you can do all of this in real time on this software. So that was really cool. And it helped us to construct what we wanted the array to look like. We're not anywhere close to 100%. The Stori's at 100%. We're nowhere close to that. I'll be lucky if we're at 70%. But we have a lot of property. So although you can't see it in this picture, there's a considerable parking lot in the foreground, like, you know, below sort of the picture, where we thought about putting carports. We had a little shelter over our book drop that had solar panels. By the time we had placed enough solar panels on our property to get to that 100% offset on the helioscope, looked like a solar field, and we were not interested in that. So we were still definitely focused on the aesthetics. We weren't going to sacrifice the aesthetics of the property and the building just so we could get to 100%. But we're happy with the array that we came up with, and that helioscope exercise was really, really interesting. So we did have the RFP because we knew what we wanted. We knew where we wanted the panels to be and how many there were. So we were set going in with what we wanted. Then, of course, you have to go through the permits and that whole process. Both the RFP and the permit process were completely handled by our vendor. Now, we worked with Veregy, V-E-R-E-G-Y. They're formerly known as Johnson Mello. Like Stori, we had a great experience with them. They were the first ones that we called. We started working with them. They gave us a lot of information before we had given them a penny. They even put the request for proposal together for us, which I honestly felt a little weird about. Like, they're going to put the document out that they're going to bid for. But I think that's pretty typical. I'm certainly not qualified to put that out. My attorney isn't necessarily qualified to put that out. He did review it. And, you know, we followed all the checks and balances. I think it's all pretty standard. We did not have anybody else bid on the project. We had some people ask about it. But we did only just get the one bid from Veregy, and we went with Veregy. So I think it's probably a good idea to talk with the other players out there. You know, it sounds like Stori did a good job with some of that. We didn't. We started working with Veregy straight away. We were really happy with them. We liked what they had to say, and they were the winning bidder. So my experience here is very much limited to what we did with Veregy. Veregy also took care of all the permits. I never had to walk into town hall. I never had to go before the town council or any board or anything outside of my own library board to get any of the compliance measures taken care of. They took care of all of that for me. They would bring me documentation, explain what it was if I needed to sign something. It was pretty much all set with that. Construction was really easy overall because it's all outside. So they're not really too much in our way. They're a little bit in our way, you know, in the parking lot. We couldn't get back, you know, here and there for a few days, but generally speaking, they staged everything outside of our way. It can get a little noisy if they're putting roof panels on, because obviously they have to fasten them. So you'd be in your nice quiet library and then you'd hear like a ka-choo, and that can be a little startling. But again, that's to be expected as long as you know that they're out there. But they're in your back areas, in your electrical rooms and on the roof, and they're not, you know, in your public areas doing a lot of noise and making a mess or anything like that. So the construction process overall was good. Unlike Stori, we did have some delays, fairly significant delays over the process, especially with getting the structural steel for the carports and the brick. We have brick on the carports. There was a lot that needed to be ordered, and we did not meet the order minimum. So we had to wait for somebody else somewhere to order the same brick so that they could actually manufacture the brick. And now we're just reaping the savings. So we definitely are seeing decrease in our electric bills. We are on net metering, similar to Stori, but we actually, when we overproduce, we get money in an account directly. So just last month, we got like $90. I think the most I've ever seen was 217. So it's not a ton of money that's coming back to us in that way. We don't often overproduce. Like I said, we're not close to 100%, but those production time periods are broken down into smaller chunks of time. So there may be a couple weeks where we overproduce, just depending on what the weather was like or what was going on at the library at the time. Okay, Courtney. So these are the things, again, that I mentioned your board is probably concerned about: the warranties, the maintenance costs, insurance costs. We've already touched on a lot of this. I do want to talk just for a second about the firefighting plan, which I mentioned there. Stori did not have this experience, and I don't know of anybody else who has that I've talked with, but our insurance company wanted our local fire department to provide a written document with how they would fight a fire at the library powered with solar. I guess it's not a good idea to just show up and start spraying a fire retardant on solar panels that could be energized at the time. So they needed to know how to come to the library on site and basically shut it all down. And then we had to very clearly mark that giant, breaker switch to shut everything down and make sure that that was all documented and sent to the insurance company. So that was an extra little hoop, not a big problem. The firefighters and the local fire department, they were happy to work with us on that. Insurance costs definitely went up. Now, remember, I do have carports, so that's a completely different structure. Stori's got a different structure on her property now, but my electric went up, or I'm sorry, my insurance went up about $3,800 a year. So that's a lot, and that's something to take into account when you're looking at the overall offset. And when you think about the offset, and this is a question you're going to get from the public too, the public often will ask you, what's your ROI, your return on investment? Our project was $1.2 million. I'm going to be well retired by the time we make up $1.2 million in savings off of this project. Honestly, I'm not concerned with an ROI. That may not be what my community wants to hear, but I'm concerned with cash flow. So if this is going to effectively save me $50,000 a year, I can do a lot with $50,000 a year. That's a full-time librarian at my library easily. So I'm not concerned with getting my money back in the end. We paid with a bond. We had the money there on hand at the time. Obviously, we're paying the bond off, but I was more concerned with cash flow. So you will get questions like that from the public. They want to know, how much you're saving. And it's good, especially for your front desk staff, to have some kind of one pager or information so that they can share that and they're able to answer those questions. We also have a kiosk at the front desk with a screen that rotates and shows, how many trees have we saved and how many cars have we taken off the road and all of that. So that's good for the public as well to see the difference that the solar project has made. I think that's about all I've got. Looks like we've got about 10 minutes left or so for questions.
Okay, if you have any questions for Lynn or Stori, please type those in the chat box. I don't see anything, any questions right now. If you're watching an archived recording of this, information on how to obtain your LEU are going to be in the video's description in YouTube. If you're attending live, I will be sending out the recording along with the slides and resources, and I feel like there's one more thing. Oh, and your LEU. and I'll probably get to that next week. So we'll just stay on for a few more minutes. If you have any questions, please type those in the chat box now. Thank you so much, Stori and Lynn. It's great information.
My pleasure. And like I mentioned, I'm happy to talk with anybody. I mean, if you want to call and get more information, if you want to come visit, come on.
Same goes for me. If you would like to come and visit or have questions, you can give a call, or your board members. Yes, we get lots of questions about it. So
Lynn, we had a question come through. In the picture, it looks like every third spot is taken up with support structure. Did you all lose parking overall adding carports?
We did technically, but nobody ever parked there. It was just wasted space, that whole, because there's no good way to get in the building from that back lot. The entrance is all the way around the building, and then staff parks way far. So nobody ever parked in those spaces. Now people park in them.
covered parking, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. So I don't know about you, Stori. We didn't care about carports. The only reason we put carports up was so that we could put solar panels on our property. That's the only reason we did carports. I had no intention of parking under carports. I didn't really care about carports. Oh, they're great. The first time I pulled under one, I was like, wow, this is really nice. Your car is a lot cooler in the summertime. And it's good for, not having to wipe off a bunch of snow. But no, Stori has those. Stori, talk about your EV charging stations.
Yes, we have one charger and it has 2 leads on it. So two cars can charge at the same time, and one's not draining the others. They each have their own connection to them, or 220 connections going to them. So yeah, our chargers they're operational. We have there's a bit of at the moment it's not working precisely because we've got an issue that we're working through, but how it was working and how it will proceed to work is that we're offering library patrons, if you have a library card, then you have 2 free hours of charging. So you could come to the library, call us down at the pump and say, if the one was open, you just pull up and just say, hey, I'm here to charge. And then we would look them up. If they have a library card, then we would start charging at a 0 rate. And then at 2 hours, we would stop the charging. And then the public could charge at a rate of, I think it's $1.50 plus 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And there's an app. So you just go, there's a QR code, you scan the code and download the app. And then, I get like $12 a month.
Okay. I was wondering if you're breaking even with that, or if you're actually making, hey, $12 a month. That's $12 you didn't have before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's not a giant money maker for us necessarily. And that wasn't the intent for it to be a giant money maker, but I will say that the array was designed to be able to absorb some charging. And then with that small, and it's a really nominal fee. If you have an electric vehicle charger, then you might be more aware of the prices for charging in locations. Ours is a really nominal price that we're charging. And so it's basically is enough to cover the cost that it's pulling from the array. So that's all it is, just breaking even.
We've thought about installing those. I have a little reservation of them. I mean, I'm not usually one to not want to just try something, but I'm a little concerned about security. We're right off the freeway kind of, and I could see a lot of people like stopping in the middle of the night or something like that to charge. Do you have any problems with that?
No, we installed a camera specifically under the carport to watch the EV charger. And we have had no issues at all so far. And I think that if you were to charge, Lynn, that might be a little bit of a revenue stream for you if you're that close.
Right. We've talked with Verigy a little bit about that, because I understand that I think there are some kickbacks right now on EV charging stations too. So it's a good time to jump on that, I think, as well. But I just haven't gotten there.
Yes. And I will ditto your comment about you weren't expecting to build carports. You just wanted solar panels. Us too. And it actually dawned on us after we were in, we had the designs, we were looking at this, and one day at a board meeting, the light bulb went off and we said, this is covered parking. We're building covered parking. It just was not how we were looking at the project, but it's a benefit.
Right. Yeah, the public could see these carports going up and they would joke around that it's covered parking for the staff.
I just want to point out that those resources are in the back of this presentation. You will get those in the email I send with your LEU and the recording, but I did want to keep up this slide in case you needed Stori or Lynn's contact information. Again, if you have any questions, we're almost at the top of the hour. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat now, or maybe get with Stori or Lynn via email. And again, I will send out some information probably next week with the recording, the slides, and your LEU. So thank you so much, Lynn and Stori. Again, I don't see any questions coming in, so we can go ahead and stop the recording.